I can only advise clients on questions of Indian law.
What do you think are some of the most common legal mistakes any entrepreneur does?
I'm able to help in drafting the contracts. I'm able to help in negotiations.
Which jurisdiction is the most good one for any company to go about? Welcome to another exciting episode of the Collaborative Canvas. I'm your host, Ankesh, and I am thrilled to have you with us today. Whether you're a long-time listener or just joining for the first time, welcome to the show where we engage in powerful conversations with leaders, innovators, and change makers from around the world. Before we jump into today's discussion, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your Spotify and YouTube so you never miss an episode we launch. And if you enjoy what you hear, be sure to leave us a review and share the episode with your network to help us grow this community of curious minds. Now, today's episode is going to be a special one with a lot of dynamism into it. We'll be deep diving into the dynamic intersection of law, entrepreneurship, and intellectual property. These fields are not only shaping the future of business, but also have a profound impact on innovation and the way companies protect and scale their ideas. So, whether you are an entrepreneur looking to navigate the legal complexities of your business or someone curious about how intellectual property rights can make or break a venture, this conversation will offer valuable insights. We'll explore how legal frameworks are evolving to support innovations and why it is critical for entrepreneurs to understand the transactional aspect of their business. And to guide us through these topics, we have an exceptional guest with us today, Seemantani Sharma. Seemantani is an accomplished Indian qualified lawyer, currently based in Malaysia, whose international legal career spans multiple countries and specialization. She has been called to the bar in India in 2013, and her academic credentials are equally impressive. Simantani holds a PhD in law from the University of Technology, Sydney, as a Commonwealth scholar, and she has earned Masters of Law from the prestigious George Washington University, building on her foundations with a Bachelor of Law from India. Simantani expertise lies in transactional matters and intellectual property law, and she has carved out a niche for herself as an independent legal consultant, advising entrepreneurs from India, the US, and Australia. Her work spans everything from guiding startups through the complexities of the contract and negotiations to helping business protect their innovation with robust intellectual property strategies. Today, we will be delving into her experience working across borders, the challenges and the opportunities facing entrepreneurs, and the pivotal role intellectual property plays in the modern business landscape. So, without further ado, let's welcome Simantani onto the show and dive her into into this fascinating conversation. Hi, Simantani. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Ankesh. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to have a conversation with your audience. It's really a great opportunity, a great honor for me to be here. I can see that this podcast is really having a very grassroots impact on entrepreneurs and uh, larger community at whole, business leaders and people who are just interested in business and marketing and entrepreneurship. So it's truly my honor to be here.
Thank you so much, Simantani. To start with, I've already mentioned a bit of it, but I think, let's hear from you. What do you do? How you've been currently managing everything and based out of Malaysia, and just talk us about yourself a little bit.
Right. So I completed my Bachelor of Laws from the Guru Gobind Singh Indraprasth University in Delhi. So for the benefit of our viewers, I actually went to the Amity Law School. But there are two Amity Law Schools. One is the Amity Law School, which is affiliated with the Amity University in Noida, and one is the Amity Law School, which is under the Guru Gobind Singh Indraprasth University, which is at least at that point when I cracked the exam, it was amongst the top 10 law schools. So that's where I completed the 5-year Bachelor of Laws program from India. There is generally in India, lawyers could first do their their bachelor's and then go on to study law. But I directly after my schooling was quite clear on the fact that I wanted to do law. So then I completed my law. Then after completing my law from Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University, I actually worked for a company known as RSG Media Systems in New Delhi, where I was doing a lot of work related to intellectual property. And after working there for 1 year, I decided that I wanted to further my education because intellectual property at that point in India was a very niche field. It was just upcoming, and my foundational studies in law school were not. I mean, it did not equip me enough to give me an understanding, a whole perspective of intellectual property law. So then I went to the George Washington University Law School. I studied Master of Laws, and I specialized in intellectual property. So I did a wide range of courses, and then I also stayed back in the US for 1 year. So if you are doing a if you're doing a non-STEM degree, you can stay in the US for 1 year duration on the OPT. And I actually worked with my university as a legal researcher, and I did a lot of work on intellectual property. And after my OPT period got over, I got an opportunity to move to Malaysia to work for an organization known as the Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union. And I started working as the legal officer, intellectual property and regulatory. So I worked there for 3 years, and during that 3 year period, I again got an opportunity to go to the World Intellectual Property Organization, which is a UN agency working on intellectual property. So I got some very good exposure early on in my career on how international treaties work, what are the stakes involved when national governments are negotiating international treaties, and what is basically what property in general, and how is it relevant to different organizations, and and I also got some understanding of how intellectual property is relevant for startups. So how I ended up becoming an independent legal consultant, it actually only started in 2019 when I started doing my PhD. So after working in Malaysia for 3 years, I decided further to further my education. And then I was very lucky to get a scholarship from the Australian government to study at the University of Technology, Sydney. My PhD topic, again, at that point was on a specific aspect of intellectual property law, which is copyright and performers' rights. And also it involves some questions related to contracts. So I was lucky and I got a scholarship, and then I moved to Australia in 2019. So 6 months into the PhD, I just thought that I should start freelancing as well, because the way how the PhD works is that at some points in time, you're very busy writing the thesis, but at certain points, you're not doing anything because your draft is with your supervisors and they're doing the reading. So I was quite free, and I wanted to start, because I had accumulated so much of legal knowledge, I thought I should just try my hands on. And I also had, like at least 6 to 7 years of international experience. So then I enrolled myself on the freelancing platform Upwork. And then I started getting projects from there. Initially, of course, I struggled a bit, but then I gradually built up my portfolio. And I was lucky enough to get a lot of projects from entrepreneurs across the world. And just for the benefit of your audience, I just want to tell you that because I'm an Indian qualified lawyer, I can only advise clients on questions of Indian law. I cannot advise clients on questions on a foreign law. However, I have carved my niche in transactional matters, which essentially means is that when there are, if there is an entrepreneur who's based in India and he is getting some investors from Singapore, so in those kind of situations, I'm able to help in drafting the contracts. I'm able to help in negotiations. But I, of course, will not be able to advise on that, whether XYZ is legal under the Singaporean law or not. I could do that based on research because, Singapore's legal framework is quite similar to Indian legal framework because it's all based on the British common law. But my forte actually lies in transactional matters, which means negotiations and drafting contracts and advising on cross-border transactions. Not advising, like the drafting part of complex transactions, basically on the documentation part.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of cases which you just mentioned that, you do the documentation when it comes to, people who are kind of opening up their companies in outside of India or probably Singapore and there. The first and foremost is, I've seen a lot of people make certain mistakes when it comes to writing contracts or writing, legal bindings, they do tons of mistakes. Based on your experience, what do you think are some of the most common legal mistakes any entrepreneur does or they do?
Right. So I think at the foremost, the biggest mistake which any entrepreneur commits is they don't engage with a lawyer from the starting. And I see lawyers, entrepreneurs making this mistake all the time. And it is understandable why entrepreneurs might be hesitant to engage with lawyers because lawyers are expensive. And for a lawyer and for an entrepreneur who is bootstrapped or who is starting out, using their own funds, and when they have to make decisions about whether to spend money on product development or to hire people to work for them or to spend money on marketing and promotion and legal fee. I mean, engaging with a lawyer is probably very down in the list. But what I would recommend is that it is probably worthwhile for entrepreneurs to at least have one or two lawyer friends. And I think all of us should have at least a lawyer friend who is willing to work with an entrepreneur for a small share in the equity. So, even if an entrepreneur is not in a position to pay an upright fee to the lawyer, and you can have some sort of an arrangement whereby you are willing to, whereby an entrepreneur is willing to give up a part of a small equity. Now, coming to the legal mistakes, there are quite a few of them, and I'm actually working on a book known as The Legal Guide for Entrepreneurs, which talks at length about the legal mistakes which entrepreneurs are making. So, at the very first most, not hiring a lawyer, and the second very common mistake is not drafting contracts on your own. Like many entrepreneurs think that, drafting contracts is easy. And what they do is that they basically go on Google and they try to, find these online templates and they download it and they use that. And you must understand, and entrepreneurs must really understand that, as lawyers, we spend 5 years in law school. So there are certain special skills that we have in drafting contracts in drafting contracts and in drafting legal documents. So probably when you're starting out, it is okay if you just use some of these online templates. But as your business grows, you really need some bespoke legal documents. And then there are also some other mistakes related to, having the ROI, not having, making a wrong choice with respect to incorporation. I think that's a very important part that, many entrepreneurs at the starting are very confused about where they want to incorporate, and that confusion primarily stems from the fact that they are not engaging with a lawyer from the starting, and probably they don't have an end goal in mind.
Yeah, I think that's rightly said because I remember when I had a conversation with one of my friends who's kind of starting up a venture, and I think that was like a couple of years back. So within market research, there have been evolutions around, how data is being captured and how data supply is being taken up. And people may use, what so-called marketplaces where you exchange demand and supply. Now, this guy wanted to open up his own company doing the same thing, but he was kind of engaging with the marketplaces. And it's not necessarily that, your terms and conditions of your company states the same as those suppliers because they had a different product altogether. You're taking a support from them. You cannot keep the same contracts. I think that's a couple of mistakes that they do other than the templates part. But I think these are the some of those challenges that you probably be facing quite often with Indian entrepreneurs as well.
Yes, and I think this is actually a very common problem with Indian entrepreneurs. And I see a lot of my entrepreneur friends based in India making this mistake that they just download generic templates, and they just use that. Sometimes, what happens, this is a very, very basic thing that, a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs, they would hire a developer, and this developer will supply their own terms of conditions and privacy policy. And when you read these terms and condition and privacy policy, they are so generic. They really don't capture the essence of what the business is all about. And only very later on, when there is some problem that crops up, the entrepreneur realizes that, the terms and conditions were not well drafted or there was something wrong with the privacy policy. So these are the sort of things that entrepreneurs should be aware of. And the other issue is, of course, about intellectual property, which is a matter of I can go on speaking hours and hours about it.
Just Seemantani, sir, one more thing which I recall from the conversation that you did, that when it comes to Indian entrepreneurs, you generally work on drafting or documenting their uh, contracts, and probably not necessarily um, if I really wanted to open up my own company in, say, Singapore or Dubai, or which I've generally seen that people generally open up their companies in any parts of the world. What is the best jurisdiction would you recommend where, opening up a company would ease out a lot of pressure? Because when it comes to India, there are a lot of compliance that people have to go through. So they hire CAs, they hire legal people, they hire CS and everybody else. And when it comes to setting up another company or a branch office into some other country, there are other legal hassles as well. Which jurisdiction is the most good one for any company to go about?
Right. So I think for Indian entrepreneurs, Singapore is probably the best jurisdiction in my observation and in my research and what I've seen from my friends doing. And there are a couple of reasons for this. Firstly, Singapore's strategic location from India is just 5.5 hours away by plane. Then the regulatory environment is very transparent. The legal system is very, very transparent. They have a very robust corporate governance mechanism. The intellectual property framework is very solid, and the judiciary is very fair and transparent. Then the tax rates are quite affordable, and India also has a double tax avoidance treaty with Singapore, and in general, India and Singapore's bilateral relations are quite solid. So if an Indian entrepreneur decides to incorporate in Singapore, they can be assured that they would be treated fairly. Of course, every country will have its own laws, and you, as an entrepreneur, you have to comply with those laws. But in my view, Singapore is probably the best. The second best could probably be Hong Kong, and that is particularly for those entrepreneurs who want to access the mainland Chinese market. Hong Kong is also based on the English common law, and both in Hong Kong and in Singapore, you can actually incorporate within 1 to 3 days. However, entrepreneurs who are watching this show, they would know that starting a company in India and then the compliance burdens are just way too heavy. So I really wouldn't recommend Indian entrepreneurs to incorporate in India.
And that's rightly said, because again, compliances are one thing. Then setting up a base or a new company outside of India, I'm sure uh, if you're listening this, all the aspiring entrepreneurs, I can tell you that you can reach out to Seemantani for these concerns, with your concerns about setting up a new office in some other country, and she'll definitely be able to help you out. Seemantani, one quick question. I remember that you mentioned about uh, a lot of online templates people use, and I think it's all because the legal costs are sometimes very heavy or they're very high. So considering that if they're using these online templates to offset some of their legal costs, how reliable are these online templates are, and by far how close they can actually do and just go away with that without thinking that this could uh, be an impactful in future if they probably get caught. What's your take
Right,
on this?
right. So my take on this is that these templates are, of course, not 100% reliable, but for an entrepreneur who is just starting out, they can probably use these online templates for some basic stuff, like, when they're hiring a contractor, or if they're hiring an employee, or if they are doing an intellectual property assignment agreement, or they're entering into services agreement for partnership agreements when they are starting out. So when an entrepreneur is starting out, they can rely on these templates because hiring a lawyer would be a lot of work. But as and when the business grows, at some point, you have to get bespoke legal documents, because that is when you need the expertise of a lawyer. And just to give you an example, when you look at these online templates, they have some very generic terms on dispute resolution, on choice of location. It would just say that you will arbitrate, that you will resolve any disputes via arbitration, and it just ends there. But there are some very specific integrities even about arbitration. Okay, so if you decide to arbitrate, and just for the benefit of our audience, arbitration is a form of dispute resolution, which wherein two parties decide that if there is any problem, if there is any dispute, they will not go to a court. They will hire an independent third party and they will resolve it within themselves. So even with respect to arbitration, there are a lot of issues like, who is going to bear the cost of arbitration? Where will this arbitration take place? Now, in cross-border transactions, this becomes very important. Like, for example, if an entrepreneur is based in India, but the investor is based in Singapore, and then if you have just said, oh, we are going to resolve the dispute by arbitration, and it stops there, and it does not specify about, where is the place of arbitration, who is going to bear the cost. So in future, if you encounter any problem with your investors, or if an entrepreneur is encountering any problem with the investors, then coming to a consensus could be a problem, and it could just take away a lot of your mental bandwidth which the entrepreneur could actually be spending on their business. But if from the starting the contract was well written and everything was clear, there would be no scope for back and forth and for any confusion.
And to ensure that this happens seamlessly, you probably have to consult a legal lawyer. Now, coming up to the fact that the first thing that comes to people's mind is that the legal costs are pretty heavy. What is that advice that you probably be thinking to give to our audience that how they can reduce these legal costs?
Right. So when it comes to reduction of legal fees, I think the first thing which entrepreneurs can consider doing is that, do some of the basic research on your own. Do the groundwork on your own. Like, for example, you just asked me that, which are the good jurisdictions. So you nail down 3 or 4 jurisdictions by yourself that, I have Singapore, Dubai, Hong Kong, and maybe US in my mind. And the reason why I have nailed down these jurisdictions is because XYZ reasons. And then you speak to a lawyer, an international lawyer, that and this that these are the 4 jurisdictions. Where should I incorporate? So when you have done the groundwork, the lawyer needs little time for you to consult with. So for example, typically if you have not done the groundwork, you would want to speak with the lawyer for an hour. But if you've already done the groundwork, you would probably need to speak to the lawyer for only 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And the way how many lawyers work is there are many different fee models, but typically many lawyers work on an hourly basis, and the hourly rates for good lawyers could be quite expensive, starting from $150 to $200. But if you only need to speak to the lawyer for maybe 10 minutes, then your legal fees would be reduced. The second option that could be that, of course, you have a lawyer friend and then you give them some share in the equity, which I understand is not always a feasible option. Then the third option, especially when it comes to contracts, is that there are these lot of AI assistant tools now which are available. Legal tech is becoming quite big, and it's also fast catching up in India. So there are these apps which are coming up in India known as Lawyered, Law FII and AI. Some of them are work in progress, and some of them are actually even endorsed by Startup India. And the aim of these apps is, of course, to make legal services accessible to entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurs can consider using these AI tools. So that would help them in reducing the costs.
That's good to know. Thank you so much, Simantani. I mean, I think we covered a lot in a nutshell that, if we have to consult, which technically we should, rather than just concentrating on, getting some online templates which are not reliable. Using of the AI, you just mentioned the law tech. That's sounds definitely a go-to kind of a strategy for any entrepreneur. Hire a better lawyer to understand, whether you wanted to open up a new office in some other country and which jurisdiction would work well, which kind of a market you wanted to build upon, and you wanted to ensure that those compliances are being met. I think these are few of those questions that I had for Simantani. But in case you have any questions, just feel free to drop that out down in the comment box. And Simantani, on YouTube or LinkedIn would definitely help you answer those questions. If you have any concerns or any questions further on, you can drop your comments or just to me as well, and I'll connect you with Samantani directly, though we have her details at the end of the video, which you can definitely see. And with that, we come to the close of an insightful episode on the collaborative canvas. I wanted to take a moment to thank our incredible guest, Seemantani Sharma, for sharing her experiences and expertise with us today, for exploring the intricate world of transactional law to understanding the vital law of intellectual property in entrepreneurship. Seemantani has given us valuable perspective on how entrepreneurs navigate the legal landscape and protect their ideas across the borders. If you found today's conversation as inspiring, as informative as I did, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platforms, Spotify and YouTube. And if you have enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review and share it with your network. It really helps us more reach more listeners when who could benefit from these conversations. We have plenty more exciting episodes lined up, so stay tuned. Until next time, keep learning, keep innovating, and remember that the world of the business and entrepreneurship is constantly evolving, just like the laws that protect it. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Collaborative Canvas. Thank you, Simantani.
Thank you so much, Ankesh.